While American English and British English are similar in many ways, there are also a lot of differences. Some of the words that we use mean different things. We may use the same words, but they have different meanings. The spelling, very interesting differences in spelling as well. And pronunciation. What are those differences between American English and British English? And what about things that are uniquely American, like American idioms? That's what we're going to be exploring in this video, so stay tuned. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And now let's get into it. American English and British English are similar in a lot of ways, different in a lot of ways. We're going to explore some words, spelling, idioms, and pronunciation differences that help to show us what's unique about American English, right? What is kind of special about American English? I like American English. I like the pronunciation. Honestly, I like the pronunciation of American English. I suppose I'm biased because it's the one I grew up in, but I do like it. And I think the spelling makes a lot of sense too. But what are those things? I want to explore them together. So let's start with words. So in both American and British English, we often use the same words, but refer to different things with those words. So for example, apartment and flat. So Americans use the word flat as an adjective, and British people use the word apartment to refer to a certain type of flat. I believe that's how it works. But generally speaking, if you're talking about where you live and you live in a building, Americans will say apartment, and British people will say flat, my apartment. But essentially that is the same thing, right? For cookie and biscuit, it's a little more interesting because cookie is anything that is sweet and is sort of shaped like a circle or a square, right? And is made out of flour generally, right? And it's fairly broad. But British people also use cookie and biscuit, and a specific type of biscuit is a cookie. I think that's how it works. I could be wrong about that. But Americans use biscuit too. But when we say biscuit, what we're talking about is this big fluffy thing that's not sweet at all. It's savory that we might put gravy on top of. Biscuits and gravy. It's very fluffy. It's like bread. It's a kind of bread. It's totally unlike a cookie. So that's an interesting difference, right? Flashlight and torch are the same thing. So British people say torch and Americans say flashlight. But what I'm not sure about is what British people say when they have the thing on the stick with the fire. I guess that's not a common situation, so maybe you don't need to say it often, but maybe they're both torch? So Americans say torch for the thing on the stick with the fire, and they say flashlight for the thing with the batteries that shines the light. And in England, I believe both of those would be torch. For a car, the front of the car that you lift up to look at the engine is the hood in America and bonnet in the UK, and I think in Canada, I could be wrong about that, but I think in Canada they might say, do they say hood or bonnet? I'm not sure. Someone check me on that. My Canadian English is out of date. I'm not sure. But Americans do say bonnet. So a bonnet would be something that an Amish woman would wear, right? With a thing that goes out of the front like this, a specific style of headgear, worn by certain people. That would be a bonnet, right? And British people would say hood maybe means the thing that is on your hoodie, the hood on your hoodie, right? Goes up over your head. That is still the hood and not the bonnet, right? So again, used by both, but we have to be careful about the meanings. And I'm not sure about all of the meanings, but in England, I mean, but for American English, I find I don't know, I feel like it's very straightforward. Because, for example, the next one, we have vacation and holiday. So when when a person from the UK says, I'm going on holiday, that to me says that they're going somewhere, leaving somewhere. But in America, we would say specifically, I'm on holiday, but that just means I'm not like summer holiday, winter holiday, like winter break. It's the period of time, right? Or a holiday being an important day in the year, like Christmas, right? That would be a holiday. Whereas a vacation is when we actually go somewhere. So vacation in America is going somewhere, and holiday is a particular day in the year, or a period of time where we're just not working. For example, when you're at school and you don't have to go to school in the summer, that might be summer holiday or summer break. Now it's common to say summer break as well. And then pants and trousers, that's the classic one. In the UK, pants refers to, I believe, underwear. Your pants. In America, pants are all trousers. And Americans don't often use trousers. An American might think when they hear trousers of formal pants, like khakis or slacks or something like that. We know trousers, we just don't use them very often. And when we want to talk about that sort of thing, we use pants. So when we go to the UK and we hear pants, we're thinking of long things that you wear, but actually what they're talking about is underwear, what we would call underwear. So anyway, a lot of interesting nuances there, and you have to kind of, you have to enjoy the differences to sort of learn them and watch a lot of, I would argue, watch a lot of TV shows. What about spelling? So this is an interesting one, and I feel like American English is better in this respect. It really is. Because British English it's kind of, what happens with spelling in languages, especially in English as it evolves over time, is things get simplified in pronunciation, but often the spelling lags behind. That's why we still spell night, K-N-I-G-H-T, and enough, E-N-O-U-G-H, instead of E-N-U-F or something like that. E-N-U-F-F would be enough, would be the best way to spell that phonetically, but we don't spell it like that because spelling sticks. It's in books. It's harder to change. It changes more slowly over time. But American English uses different spellings from British English spelling. I think they're more straightforward, personally. And there are a lot of them, but a few examples. Anytime you see OR, often at the end of a word in American English, it'll be OUR in British English. That doesn't mean we never use OUR in American English, but for a lot of the word endings specifically, and especially RE and ER, I believe that's the influence of French on English. The RE is the French spelling, and then Americans reverse the ER in American English. Realize and realize, ISE and IZE for a lot of those words that end with or have that S at the end. Now, this one makes perfect sense to me because it is a Z sound, right? Like size, there's a Z there. Realize, there's a Z there. And when I see that R-E-A-L-I-S-E, my brain goes realize. And I think, what? It's confusing, right? And it's the same with a word like advertisement. Although I suppose for advertisement, now my brain doesn't do that for advertisement because I've seen that spelled both ways in America. So in some areas we're not. In some areas we're like this weird hybrid where sometimes we're using the British spelling and sometimes we have our own American spelling. Sometimes it's both. It gets messy. It gets sort of complicated. Canceled, the double L. Why do you need two L's? Yeah, one L is enough. I think that's fine, right? And that's another common one you see. Sometimes double letters, particularly L, in British English, and the American spelling being only one. Okay, also interesting. Now let's go on to some idioms. Now, we're not looking at comparisons here. These are idioms that are specifically from America, specifically unique American idioms. Spill the beans, to tell a secret, to reveal something. Spill the beans, tell me what happened. This is, well, it's can of beans. We can picture a can of beans and the beans falling out of the can. Someone has spilled the beans. They've sort of revealed something. They've let everything out. To bite the bullet comes from the Civil War, where they would have to do amputations, but they didn't have any anesthetic, and so you'd have to actually bite down on a bullet to bear the pain. So bite the bullet means to just suffer through something, get through it. Just bite the bullet and do it, right, to get through something difficult. To throw in the towel comes from boxing, right? To throw in the towel means you quit, right? I'm going to throw in the towel. I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I can't handle it. For any sort of situation, a project you're working on, whatever it is, right? Marriage, anything like that, you might throw in the towel, meaning you give up. And again, that comes from boxing. Jump on the bandwagon. So to jump on a bandwagon is to join a popular movement. To jump on a bandwagon is to see that everyone else is doing that, so you start doing that, right? To jump off the bandwagon is to fall off the bandwagon is sometimes used to, well, if it's just wagon, it's used to talk about addiction and things you're addicted to, but it can be used to mean sort of jump off the bandwagon, the opposite of, I don't like this movement anymore. It's much more common to say jump on the bandwagon, to join something that's popular, right? And it can be used in other ways too. Couch potato is a person sitting on the sofa eating chips or crisps rather, and they're lazy. So a couch potato is a lazy person or someone who's just behaving in a lazy way right now. I just want to relax for the weekend. I want to be a couch potato. That doesn't mean I'm a lazy person. Maybe I'm rewarding myself working very hard. Now I get to be lazy. So leave me alone. Let me watch TV. I just want to relax and decompress over the weekend, and then I'll go back to being a very productive human being, right? So common. We have one more category to talk about, and that category is pronunciation. Now, the interesting thing about pronunciation differences between American English and British English that's right. I got lost in my own sentence. That most of the time it's the same. For a lot of stuff, people get the idea that there's this British accent is just totally different. Every sound is different. No, a lot of the sounds are the same. But because certain sounds are in many words, then it sounds like a lot. It's not as much as you might imagine. But for example, the R sound, but not all the R sounds. For example, the word hard, that has one R, and that R is at the end of the word. And so those end of word or word ending or syllable ending R sounds, if it's at the end of the syllable or the end of the word, is going to be more open for British English and more hard for American English, meaning we really stick our tongues up and backward to say that clear sound. Hard, right? That's the sound. And that doesn't mean that British people can't make the R sound, because for a word like rare, they say the part exactly the same. But they don't say rare, because Americans say rare. The second R sound at the end of the word or the end of the syllable is instead more open, like rare. And so it's not, they don't curl it up for the end often, right? So my British, which I have a terrible British accent, but my British version of hard would be hard, and rare, and hard. So that there's a thing there, right? But it's not the clear R sound. And I know that's not a perfectly realistic British accent, but that's the basic idea, right? What about better and water? So this is interesting because there are a lot of different dialects, of course, in British English as well. But if you have the T there in this sort of situation where there's an R, an ER after it, or often a lot of vowels after it, then Americans will say this very interesting thing called a light D sound. We'll say better and water, better and water, better and water. And you do hear British people saying that sometimes too. But I feel like it's more common, or much more common at least than in America, for British people to say better and water more, right? And you also hear a complete stop sound where it's better and water, and that happens too. So either completely skips the T sound or hits the T sound as a T sound. And Americans tend to say better and water. There's a da-da-da-da-da, there's a light D sound. And that's an oversimplification, of course, but generally speaking, Americans are more likely to hit that T as a D when there's that vowel sound following the T in the case of better and water. Now, what about button and mountain? So, for button and mountain, I think both British people and American people, for both pronunciations, button and mountain would be common. We would both say both. But sometimes there's a difference. So, for example, Americans may often skip the T sound, for example, in mountain after the N, and skip the T sound in the middle by saying button and mountain. Button and mountain. So there's a stop in the voice. That's the stop T. The voice goes, huh, like that, cuts off, and then it continues. Button, mountain. And that's a unique sound, right? And that might be something that British people will do sometimes too, or the British accent has that sometimes as well. For example, water, is that right? That's like a Cockney water. There's this water. That stop sound there. I'm outing myself as having a terrible British accent, but that sound there, that stop sound, is there in British English, but you're more likely to hear button, a clear button, and a clear mountain than what Americans do in those specific cases, which is more often button, mountain. Now, there's also some interesting differences in, let's just say, some different words, right? For example, Americans say advertisement, advertisement, advertisement. In American English, no matter how you spell it, right? In American English, if you say that, advertisement, the first syllable is stressed. Advertisement. And it's a ties sound. You might hear in British English more often a stress on the second syllable. So adver, and then instead of advertisement, maybe advertisement, tisement. So there's an S sound instead of a Z sound. But I think the important difference there is on the stress of the syllable, stressing the second syllable rather than the first syllable. Now, there's another interesting difference, which I find quite interesting because not all H words have this, but in the case of a word like herb, Americans say herb. We cut out the H sound, and we say hour and herb. For example, hour and herb. We use the same rule for both of those. Those both don't have a pronounced H at the beginning. It's herb and hour. Whereas in British English, you get hour, but it's herb. So you hear the H there. Inconsistent a little bit, maybe? I don't know. I'm not making, yeah, it is. It is a little inconsistent. So I prefer herb, but again, I'm heavily biased. This whole thing is extremely biased, of course. I'm totally biased, 100%. Tomato, Americans will say tomato. There's an A sound there. And the British accent might be more likely to be tomato. More of an ah sound there. Slightly different vowel sound. And again, that's oversimplified because there are a lot of dialectical differences in the UK, right? In the United States of America, tons, right? So these are generalities, but I think interesting generalities. So if you have any questions or other interesting examples you'd like to share about American English, British English, or whatever, feel free to let me know in the comments. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And also check out my free course, Natural English Conversations, in the links in the description.